reached out to the former owner actually in 2015. So it was a 5-year process to acquire that business and that intellectual property. But we had agreed on 2020 as the date when he was going to retire. So here we are in the middle of COVID and everything that's happening. And it was like, well, we agreed upon this a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it was not the best time, but it was that do or die moment where it's like, you know what? I felt like it was meant to be because we had planned this for so long that if I took the chance and we made this big acquisition and did this rebrand and everything else, that was going to be the catalyst to pull us out of this low spot in our business. And it was a big risk, but it paid off big time.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Blueprint. I'm Courtney Cook, founder of Monarch COO, where I help mission-driven entrepreneurs grow their businesses. Each week, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs to explore the stories behind their successes and challenges. Whether you're just dreaming of starting a business or already building one, this podcast is here to show you that entrepreneurship is more attainable than it might seem, with insights for every stage of the journey. Let's dive in to today's conversation and see what it takes to build a business. Today on the podcast, I have Tom Rauen with me. So Tom, can you introduce yourself, share a little bit about who you are, your business, who you serve, and how long you've been a business owner?
Yes. I live in Dubuque, Iowa. The business is 1-800tshirts.com. And I started in my parents' basement 20 years ago. We do custom branded apparel and promotional products for businesses, sports teams, events, nonprofits, really anybody looking for, custom branded stuff, swag, all the fun stuff to brand businesses, events, and teams. And yeah, we've been doing this for 20 years.
That's awesome. So what inspired the idea for your business? What made you start it 20 years ago?
I was doing it in college, so it kind of was like a side hustle. In high school and college, I'd come up with different t-shirt designs and we'd be selling them at football games, or I'd go around the dorms and sell them. And I was bartending at the time. I'd graduated and I got to know a lot of business owners through bartending. And
Nice.
I thought like, okay, I've got a computer graphics degree. I know, how to make money with t-shirts. And I had a pretty good network built of business owners and other people in the community that I thought, all right, if I started doing uniforms and t-shirts and whatnot for, whether it was sports teams or other businesses and bars and restaurants and stuff like that, I figured I'd be able to make a go at it since I had already built up kind of a network and I knew how to make money doing that.
Nice. That's awesome. So was there a specific moment, when you were like, oh, like this is actually a standalone like business. I don't have to bartend. I don't have to do these extra things. Like this is what I'm doing.
I don't know if there was a specific moment. I just kind of went all in. And so I started in my parents' basement and that lasted about 6 months. And I think maybe that was the moment where I was like, okay, well, I can only grow so much here. I was in like, essentially a 10 by 10 room. And it was like, all right, so we rented a 2,000 square foot space, retail space, right high traffic area in our town. And maybe that was the moment of like, all right, now we're paying rent. We've got this 2,000 square foot space. We've got to order, get some more equipment and really start kind of cranking this thing up. And I feel like just organically, the business started to grow, as we moved in that space. We continued to build relationships, put out the product, and kind of that word of mouth referral, just started from day one. And, we got organic growth from that. And really for the last 20 years, we've been growing about 20% annually for 20 years straight.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So you started like fully just brick and mortar, or did you get a website going right away, or like did you transition to e-commerce, or like what was that?
Yeah, we started fully brick and mortar. The e-commerce side really didn't come until a lot later. And when we started, we were the name of the business was Envision Sports Designs, and then we rebranded it to Envision Tees, and then Envision Screen Printing Embroidery. as the business kind of evolved. And then in 2020 is when we acquired the 1-800 T-shirts brand and rebranded everything to that, to
Nice.
more e-commerce, national scale.
Yeah, and what a time to buy that up also. That's
Yeah, so
amazing.
it was the worst and the best timing
Yeah.
I could have did for that. So I reached out to the former owner actually in 2015. So it was a 5-year
Oh.
process to acquire that business and that intellectual property. But we had agreed on 2020 as the date when he was going to retire, back in 2015, because he was going to be 65 and at retirement age. And so here we are in the middle of COVID and everything that's happening. And it was like, well, we agreed upon this, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it was not the best time, but it was kind of like that do or die moment where it's like, you know what? We, I felt like the stars were aligned. I felt like it was meant to be because we had
Mhm.
planned this for so long that if I took the chance and we made this big acquisition and did this rebrand and everything else, like that was going to be the catalyst to pull us out of this COVID uh, dundrum, of like, the low spot in our
Mhm.
business. And it was a big risk, but it paid off big time. So that was the catalyst, the shot in the arm that really kind of, as we headed into the fall of 2020, we got a lot of momentum. A lot of our customers started opening back up, whether it was schools or sports teams or different small businesses that were shut down. And like I said, we just built momentum off of that acquisition and, carried that into 2021.
That is so cool. Wow. I love that did you decide in 2015, like, I want this business? Like, what spurred that
Yeah,
initially in 2015?
Um, I didn't like, we in 2015, we were 10 years in,
Mhm.
and like I said, our brand evolved from Envision Sports Design because we started off doing a lot of sports stuff, but then we were doing more business stuff. So then we changed it to Envision Screen Printing and Embroidery, and that was just too long. Then we shortened it to Envision Tees, and the brand, we still kept getting a lot of questions. So when I started the business, I was 22, so there's a lot of things I didn't think about when starting it. And so every time we said Envision Tees to somebody, it was, do you spell that with an E or an I? And so anytime over the phone or in a public place or whatever, it was always spelling out the name completely. People probably getting it wrong on email addresses and things like
Yeah.
that. So I was like, you know what? We need a clear brand name that says what we
Mhm.
do. And what better brand name than 1-800 T-shirts?
Yeah.
It's very memorable. When
Yeah.
I meet somebody networking or I tell someone 1-800 T-shirts, like you just have to remember the phone number. It's 1-800 T-shirts.
Right.
And, for an email, Tom at 1-800tshirts.com. I don't have to spell it out to anybody. So it's sticky, it's memorable. It's a great brand. And so I reached out to the owner in 2015, was like, listen, I want to buy this. And that's when we had that conversation of, well, Frank wasn't quite ready to retire
Mhm.
yet because he was only 60, but when he turned 65 in 2020, that's when he wanted to retire. So they weren't using it specifically as their like go forward brand. It was Newton Screen Printing.
Hmm.
They just happened to have the 1-800 phone number, and Frank was smart enough, back in the early .com days to register the .com as well.
Nice.
So, that's how it all kind of came together, and
Mhm.
with that evolution from, Envision to 1-800 T-shirts.
That's awesome. I love that. Now I'm like, gosh, I want to go do that. Who can I go ask? Can I buy your business? And like, oh my gosh, what the perfect like segue for you to kind of transition brand wise. I'll never forget your email, Tom. It's so easy. So has there been something that you've run into in maybe with either after this rebrand or even prior within this 20 years where it was just a challenge that you did not see coming, that kind of knocked the wind out of you?
I think definitely just growing at that 20% every year, there's we always keep running into bottlenecks or different breaking points where the way you used to do stuff isn't the way that you need to do stuff moving forward.
Right.
And so it feels like in every little part of the business, we're constantly evolving, constantly, um, finding a new way to do stuff more efficiently, looking forward and saying, all right, if tomorrow or next year we 5x or 10x the business, like what would that look like and
Right.
what would break? And so we're trying to stay ahead of the what would break question
Mm-hmm.
all over the business. And I think a lot of that, really comes with the people and hiring. When do we, from starting off, it was me and my mom basically doing everything. You're wearing all the hats as a small business owner, and pretty soon you feel like, you're busting at the seams and working all hours of the day and every day of the week, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so then it's all right, we've got to make our first hire and then our second hire and our third and our fourth. And really it's figuring out like when the business is at a point or you think it's growing to a point to make that next hire. And really that's from hire number one. Then we've still been dealing with that. Right now we've got 40 employees and
Oh,
we're
wow.
still dealing with that. All right, are we feeling constrained in different areas? Who's wearing too many hats? What areas of upper management or maybe middle management do we need to hire as well to, continue this growth? So I think all along the way, over the last 20 years, one of the big obstacles has been like when to hire and who to hire and
Mm-hmm.
what positions, do we need and when. And that's just a constant challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like what it looks like right now in 2 years, it could look operationally very different. Not necessarily like exactly where your revenue is coming from, but just that growth overall. Now, do we need a manager now? That's a bigger investment. And what is that going to look like in 2 years? And how do we find the right fit? I can only imagine that that's just been a constant change. And you're going to have natural turnover too. And so, how do you make sure that like you have the right people in the right seats? Have you had to go through just like what does it look like when you're trying to find that right person for that seat? Like, have you dealt with really hard um issues with having to lay people off that just aren't the right fit, or like how have you gone about just finding that right culture fit too?
Yeah. So we've been very fortunate. We've got an amazing team right now, and we've had amazing people throughout the years. So I feel like, you know, I don't know if I want to say we got lucky, but we've
Mhm.
we've done a great job of, getting the right people and in the right positions and making it a good fit. And I think, after some time, whether it's 6 months or a year, we understand, and I think the team member understands like if it's a good fit or not, and if there's constant struggle or they're not happy, like
Yeah.
then it's just not a good fit for both, and it's better to just find there's another opportunity out there, another position that's going to be a better fit, another company as well. So it's just kind of figuring that part of it out. Um, but along with that, with that hiring, it's the payroll aspect as well, making sure that we're competitive, making sure that, if you overhire and you have too many people, then
Yeah.
the payroll side of the business can eat up a lot of the profit.
Mhm.
And if you're understaffed, you're not going to be delivering, the on the promise that you say on, turnaround time and the
Yeah.
level of customer service and level of attention that your customers need as well. So I always feel like there's kind of a fine line between, understaffed and overstaffed, and like where do you find that happy medium to make sure you're hitting that right in the sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a push pull of what kind of output, one more person, how much does that increase our revenue to make that worth our while? And does it really move the needle? Because it can become a huge portion of your OPEX overnight. And you're like, well, wait a second. We have some changes to make, and nobody wants to do that either. So,
Hmm.
Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or is owning your own business, has that been a surprise at all?
No, I think it was ingrained from me in me from birth.
Yeah.
Whether it was selling baseball cards as a kid or a lemonade stand, traditional
Yeah.
entrepreneur thing. In middle school, I was selling Beanie Babies.
Nice.
Um, and so it was that, and then my mom owned a hair salon, and I was selling shampoo on eBay, back in
Nice.
like right when in the early, um, I believe it was like the '90s or whatever. Basically, right when eBay started, I had like one of
Mhm.
the first accounts, and so I was always selling stuff. I'd go to garage sales and buy things and resell it, and so I've just always had this appetite for, you know, basically like figuring out how to make money to support the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that goes from, when I was a kid all the way up until now.
Yeah, yeah. And watching at least your mom, who's self-employed, I'm sure, or I assume she was self-employed, maybe she wasn't, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's also just seeing like the grit that you have to have as like I'm like it's all on me, it's all on my shoulders. It makes a big difference.
hmm
So, what are some of your goals for your business in 2025? And do you like approach your business like here's the brick and mortar side versus the e-com side, or do you kind of look at those differently in any way?
No, it's all blended together. Because we're putting in orders, whether they're
Yep.
walking through the front door or they're emailing or calling in or coming in through the website. So, we treat them all the same, and it's all revenue for the company. And so, our goal, right now is just continue to grow, continue to innovate, make sure that we're staying ahead of the industry, both on technology and equipment and everything else. One of our big focuses right now is AI and figuring out, from an industry standpoint, like how do we stay ahead of the competition?
Hmm.
How do we use it to best, leverage basically every position in our company, and how do we just make ourselves more efficient, and how do we do things a little bit differently with AI.
Yeah, I agree with like I think when there are a lot of people scared about AI and there are aspects that are definitely scary, but I also think wow, like I personally have been able to accomplish so much more in the last year because of AI that like we can all move so much faster. So hopefully all boats rise, just in business in general.
Yeah, for sure.
What's one decision you made early on that you feel like has had a major impact on your business's success?
I think early on was just do whatever it takes to get the job done. So if that meant working, you know through the night, essentially, it meant working 7 days a week, like whatever it was. I think early on the mindset, as a 22-year-old getting this business off the ground, was build the foundation, do whatever it takes, right now, to build up that client base, build up that foundation for the business, and play the long game. So knowing that every relationship mattered, every customer mattered, every order mattered, and if we got something wrong, do whatever it takes to make it right. Because it wasn't, I looked at everything as, um, a long-term relationship. Like, what does this business look like 20 or 30 years from now, and how can we set up for success 30 years from now? Not transactional, like, all right, we just have to get this next order today. It was like,
Hmm.
no, I want this customer's next 20 orders,
Yeah.
our next 500 orders, if they're going to be with us for a long time. So I think it was just really focused on, like, do whatever it takes to make it right, to create that relationship, and um, play the long game instead of the short game.
Yeah. Yep. That's great. That's a great perspective to have. So, how do you balance the demands of running your business with your personal life? Like, that's great advice. That's a great perspective as it relates to business. But then on the other hand, I assume you have a social life, a family. How do you balance all of that?
Yeah. So starting off when I was in my early 20s, wasn't married, didn't have kids.
Yeah.
And so I had the freedom to be able to put in that time. And I think that was also part of my, you know, knowing, looking forward, like, all right, well, when I'm in my 30s, I'm not going to be able to put in, these long
Mm-hmm.
days and, working the weekends and everything else. And so I think it was establishing that foundation early on and knowing, like, all right, I'm putting in the time now so that later I can have, that better balance. And as a startup in my 20s, to me, it was a game. I didn't even feel like I was working. I enjoyed being
Yeah.
there. I remember on Friday and Saturday nights, I'd invite friends over, and they'd be helping me print T-shirts, and we'd be drinking a few beers while printing T-shirts.
Yep.
As a 24-year-old, and that was like our Friday or Saturday night. So we kind of just like had fun
That's
with it,
awesome.
and enjoyed it. And then, as I got married and started having kids, we looked at, basically like what are the non-negotiables, like
Mm-hmm.
when is the workday done, what stuff is pulling me away for that, and what do we have to hire to get that work-life balance. And that's where we start adding the management levels in, of the different areas and things like that. And it's like, all right, well, instead of wearing all the hats, what's the main hat that you need to be wearing, towards your
Mm-hmm.
strong suits? And we need to hire towards any of my weaknesses.
Yeah. 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 That's perfect. So, what's the most rewarding part of just your journey as an entrepreneur and business owner?
I think just seeing the impact that we make with customers. So it's kind of crazy. Like, when I started the business, I never thought the power of a t-shirt and what that does for somebody. It's like, all right, this is a t-shirt, and people put on t-shirts every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when you see, a kid on a little league team or a t-ball team, and this is his first time being part of the team, and he's got his uniform on, he feels like he's part of the gang with
Yeah.
everybody else. And to him, like, that's his thing, right? And he loves it. And even my own kids, when they got their first baseball jersey, it was like they just want to wear it all day
Yeah.
long. And so I think that's a cool thing for a kid. And then, we do a lot of stuff for, people affected by different ailments, cancer, fundraisers and things like that. And when we print somebody's, message and their battle cry on a t-shirt, for, a cancer patient, and it's their friends and family and community coming out and supporting them, it's like when you don't know the right words to say,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes there is no right words to say.
Right.
Just wearing that T-shirt in support, whether it's a kid or an adult with cancer, knowing like all they're going through, being able to raise the money, for those charities and for those people, and being able to see them wear that, as their Superman cape essentially, the impact that makes is very gratifying. So, seeing that and the smiles, on their faces, and the impact, all that does, that is something I never thought when I started the business. Like, that was the byproduct of printing a T-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's something I really love, and it still hits just as hard today as it did the very first time I did it. So I love seeing the impact that we're able to make with T-shirts.
Yeah, I'm sure. I had my best friend went through breast cancer and I had T-shirts made for her, and I was like blown away at how many people placed orders. Blown away of like they're like, but I want a sweatshirt of this. Like, yes, but I want more. And we all wore them on the day she had all the days she had chemo, and would take pictures of ourselves in them, cheering her on. And I know that it made a really huge impact on her just to like have all that support on those really really hard days and even beyond. And I'm still wearing it, even after she's beaten it. But and it's just such a, I don't know, a t-shirt of pride of like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of her. And my daughter has one and she loves to like wear it at the same time. And then we'll talk about her. And so it is really powerful. And I love that you've been able to experience that and probably your team as well. It's
Hmm.
really incredible and makes the work really exciting, I bet.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what would you tell your younger self looking back today? Maybe when you started your business, maybe it's even before that, but is there something when you look back and maybe you're telling your kids now? What would you go back and tell yourself?
Um, Gosh, I don't know because there's some things that I look back and think, all right, I could have definitely did that differently, or there might have been an easier way to do stuff. But doing it the hard way taught me a lot of lessons.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if I would have done it the easy way, I wouldn't have learned those hard lessons
Mm-hmm.
that have then, helped in other areas as well. So, going back, I think I probably would have told my younger self of like, just keep, you know, I'm very big on goal setting. I'm very competitive. And every goal we've ever set in the business, we've achieved and then some,
Mm-hmm.
I'm far, I've done far more, than I ever thought that I would in business. And I think I would have told my younger self, like, just keep setting the bar higher and just keep going for it. Cause it's amazing what you're capable of doing. Like once you just put your head down and get after it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So, is there anything you wish you knew when you started your entrepreneurial journey that you can kind of give as words of wisdom for people who might be just starting out?
Yeah, I think so we run the EOS
Yeah.
system here, and
Awesome.
it took me a while to before I understood that the difference between a visionary and an integrator. And I'm a huge visionary, so once I understood that, I was like, gosh, this is
I love
why I've been struggling in some areas. Like I can do some operational things, but and I can like visually and I can see it and everything else, but I just can't put the structure to a lot of the systems and processes that need to happen. And so I'd see this happening in other businesses and I'm like, gosh, how are they like able to get this dialed in? And once I
Yeah.
understood that, I was like, man, I've got to find, the yin to my yang and
Mm-hmm.
need to find that person to help all that out. And really, I think it was understanding that in a lot of areas of the business where like what brings me energy, I need to focus on that. And the stuff that totally drains my energy and I'm not very good at, I need to hire that sooner.
Yeah.
And so looking back, if I would have known that, I would have said, all right, this is the stuff, like these are the things I ultimately am the best at. Here's what gives me energy. Here's what I love doing. Here's the stuff that I'm not very good at. Here's my weaknesses. And really just identify all that a lot faster and then figure out if either I've got to hire to fill those weaknesses or we've got to outsource that to, a third party vendor or an
Yeah.
agency or someone else to like remove that because that constant kind of pull back and forth, I think can be draining for entrepreneurs, especially in the startup phase where, you're trying to build momentum, but, then you get sucked into wearing a hat that doesn't fit you properly, basically.
Right.
And it's like, it's your kryptonite, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think understanding that part of it earlier would have been very beneficial. The next is the other part I wish I knew earlier is love languages,
Mm-hmm.
or the workplace version is what is it like acts of it's like your acts of it's basically how people want to be rewarded,
Yeah.
real
Okay.
similar to love languages. So
Yeah.
um, you know, if you buy like, so one of them is like gifts and acts of
Mm-hmm.
kindness and quality time. And so some employees love gifts, like gifts is their love language.
Yeah.
But if someone's is quality time and you buy them a gift, they don't care
They're
about
like,
like that
yeah.
gift card, right?
Right.
But if someone's as gifts and they don't really care about the quality time, like they don't want to hang out after
Yeah.
work. They just want to like do their thing. So I think understanding um, some of the just different things about employee characteristics, personality types, and all of that, emotional intelligence and stuff like that, like understanding that earlier on would have definitely helped as well.
Mm-hmm.
And another example of that is like, somebody that their personality type is, shy and, they don't want attention. Well, if you call them out as employee of the
Right.
month, you pretty much like they want to crawl under a
Yeah.
rock, right?
Yes.
And
Don't
so
look
I
at me.
think understanding that earlier on would have definitely helped on just any employee conflicts, or helped set us up for success to make sure that we were rewarding in the right ways, we were acknowledging in the right ways, and working together, not just for me, but I think for everyone else in the company to understand that too, of like, hey, here's how, here's the dynamic of the other people on the team as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It makes such a big difference. And I even think of like Strengths Finder is another common test where it's
Hmm.
like, for me, harmony is at the bottom of my list, but for somebody that harmony is at the top of their list, I might have to approach things a lot more delicately than what I would personally need. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a difference in how we're wired, and it's all okay. We can all get to the end goal, hopefully. We just have to go about it a little bit differently depending on who it is. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny. What was I gonna? Oh, last but not least, if people want to reach out to you, Tom, or place an order at 1-800-T-shirts.com, that's pretty easy. But how can people find you? Like, are you out on social, LinkedIn? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, LinkedIn or Instagram. So just, search for Tom Rauen or 1-800-T-shirts. And the 1-800-T-shirts handle is pretty much on every social media platform.
Awesome. That's perfect. Well, thanks so much for your time today. What an incredible story. I am just, stories like yours make me really excited. Things like just hearing about how you purchased 1-800-T-shirts.com is amazing and awesome, and I'm inspired by it. I know it might seem minor to some people, but for me, it's just little things like that. I'm like, wow, that probably changed the game, 5 years ago. For now, you probably didn't expect in 5 more years where you'd be after that acquisition. And now I'm sure it's just you're still going up on a rocket ship here with your business. So congratulations for all you've achieved and that you're doing. And yeah, I'm just grateful for your time.
Yeah, appreciate you, and thank you for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Entrepreneur's Blueprint. I hope you found inspiration and insights to fuel your entrepreneurial journey. If you're looking for support in building or scaling your business profitably, visit my website or send me an email to learn more about how I help mission-driven businesses become more profitable, proactive, and efficient. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps other entrepreneurs discover the show, and it would mean so much to me as well. Until next time, keep building, keep dreaming, and keep going.